got a text message saying there's a job on the Franklin, who's available. We just knew there was a man trapped, might require a medical team.
In your own mind you think, okay, yep, we should be done and dusted within a couple of hours. However, it didn't quite turn out that way.
How does someone's leg go into a crack and not come out? Like, surely there's a way, there's always a way. And there wasn't.
You could see the determination in Valdas's eyes. Even though his body was deteriorating, in his mind, he was not giving up.
We could definitely see the significant deterioration, and we were getting closer to that decision point where we were going to have to get him out by any means.
I felt so conflicted. If this goes ahead, you might kill him, but even if it all goes perfectly, he'll never be the same guy again.
There was a moment before I started of, I don't want to do this. I really, really don't want to do this.
I couldn't imagine how long he can survive, because time was running.
I remember the Lithuanian doctor sort of asking in his broken English, he's like, he's dead, isn't he? And I couldn't say yes, but I definitely couldn't say no. The Franklin's a pretty formidable and wild place. It's incredibly remote. There's no real road access.
There's only two ways to get there. One is by a helicopter, and the other option is to, embark on a rafting trip.
Southwest of Tassie is a magnificent place, but can bring you unstuck really quickly. What can start as an absolute magnificent day can probably end up being your worst nightmare. You get a decent rain overnight, and then all of a sudden, the waters rise quite quickly.
There are all those boulder-type rapids that just come with huge risk when you paddle them. You just need to take a great deal of care.
My relative said, "Be careful. It's very dangerous river."
There have been a number of lives taken on the Franklin, so it's a river that you need to respect, I guess you'd say.
Sveiks, Povilai! Ilgai nesimatėm. First time I met Valdas, we were paddling in Peru.
Nu ką, draugelį, susitikimą.
Valdas, with a rafting experience of close to 50 years, he was paddling very heavy rivers in Siberia and other regions of former Soviet Union. He is very brave and don't feel any fear of that.
Jisai kaip ir mūsų ta karta buvo šiek tiek jaunesnė ir mes su pavydu žiūrėjom ir svajojom kažkada plaukioti taip kaip Valdas. Neįtikėtina, tikrai buvo labai didelė pagarba iš mūsų pusės ir tikrai svajonė su tokiais žmonėm keliauti ir...
Valdas visą laiką mums yra pagrindinis mūsų šitą...
In Christmas party, somewhere in 2012, we were drunken and we started to build crazy plans. We decided that we should visit at least one river in every continent and to raise our Lithuanian flag.
When Valdas grew up, Lithuania was occupied by Russians. You couldn't say what you think, just your freedom of religion was destroyed. You couldn't travel. You couldn't travel anywhere except Soviet Union. So now, why they like to travel? I think it's a celebration of independence.
From 2015 up to now, we have visited Nepal, then South America, US, Africa, and the last continent was Australia. We chose the River Franklin in Tasmania. I like this because it is very wild river.
Valdas was part of a group of 12 friends. They set off from Lithuania in November 2024. They made their way to Victoria.
Vykome į Australiją, vienas mūsų bendražygis atsigulė į ligoninę su plaučių uždegimu, mes likome 11. Dar vienas iš mano ekipažo narių susižeidė ranką. Žodžiu, taip viskas atrodė, kad ta gamta, upė ta nusiteikusi prieš mus.
At starting point on a Collingwood bridge, there was the place where we needed to register. There were the signs that could be risky, and you take your own responsibility. Sveiki!
Bet vanduo buvo mums labai palankus. Mes išplaukėm, tas intakas Franklino, kur visi pradeda.
After several hours in the evening, started heavy rain, and the water went up approximately 80 centimeters, and our tents were wet. So next morning, we decided to take the forest and wait when the water level will be dropped down, and then in a third day continued.
Valdas was the leader of his kata raft, and that was because he'd been rafting for almost 50 years, so he was incredibly experienced. A kata raft has 2 separate pontoons, and the men carried all their food and equipment in these rafts.
Oh! On day 5, we wake up very early in the morning because we needed to reach Cascades and to reach campsite.
You probably start to really notice the remoteness of the Franklin when you're in that Great Ravine.
The Great Ravine, by definition, is an area where, the mountains are close by and it goes into a very steep kind of landscape. And at the bottom of that, you get several significant rapids through there, including the Cascades.
We arrived at Cascades Rapid. For scouting, we used drone because we are not taking risk without knowing what is waiting us in front.
Mes žiūrėjom į tą slenkstį ir po to vis tik nusprendėm, kad dar laukia daug slenkščių prieš akis ir mes nusprendėm, kad laivus apsinešim.
This day was very heavy for me because I was sick. I was sitting on the bank, on the stone, just filming. And Valdas was just working on the main rock. He was jumping from one rock to another and just slipped and dropped to the hole with the water. My friends were running to help to Valdas, and somebody cried, Valdas fell and trapped his leg.
Jisai įkrito nugarą ir jisai po to apsisuko ir jo ta koja kažkaip užsuko. Aš ten rankom, kai čiupinėjau, ten, ta prasme, buvo jinai įkišta ir susukta tarp uolų. Ten toks ankštas tarpelis.
From the very beginning, we fixed Valdas with the safety ropes and trying in different directions to take him from this hole. Valdas was quite positive, just saying, I cannot take my foot back.
Kokią 40 gal minučių patys ten bandėm visaip jį ištraukti. Niekaip. Ir tada jau nusprendėm, kad reikia kviesti gelbėtojus.
We sent SOS signal via satellite phone. We felt uncertainty and we didn't know how everything will finish.
The day was coming to an end, and my phone rang at about 3:30, and it was our police radio room.
Information had been received from a rafting party that one of their members had fallen into the river and was trapped between some rocks. So we were activated to attend the scene. It is critical time-wise that we get people there due to the possibility of obviously hypothermia and potential for the river to rise.
I was part of the first crew to head out into the Franklin that evening to essentially start the ball rolling on getting to this rafting party.
Our role was to get further information initially, how trapped that person was, pictures of the scene, severity of any injuries, and pass that back.
We're anticipating this being a protracted incident. The swiftwater team has been mobilised.
We hear noise from helicopter. Finally, and always applauds that the help arrives.
We were in the valley, and then we saw all the canoes, and then we saw him stuck next to a rapid. And then we took our time just assessing where and how we were going to, first of all, drop the first people in.
We couldn't land there, and we had to winch myself and Mitch Parkinson into that location right next to where Valdas was.
The workspace that we ended up going down onto was a large rock platform. Unfortunately, being so wet, it turns into something that I would align with an ice skating rink. It becomes really quite unsafe really quickly.
Any idea where his foot's caught, or is it both feet? Left foot. His left foot? Yeah.
Valdas in the rock pool did look quite concerning. The water flow was significant, and he appeared to be pinned up against the rock. It was clear that we're going to need some specialty tools, and that message was then relayed back to the aircraft.
Initially, we had the rescue crew from Tas Police and some Ambulance Tasmania officers, and then Nate and Ace were inserted in there as a swiftwater team.
Our ETA overhead will be 2023 minutes. Do we have any updates from the scene, by any chance?
The chopper ride was about a 30-minute flight. We were winched in with our equipment.
How are you, Jimmy? Oh, yeah, one of those days.
From the time we got on scene, I think we had another hour and a half of daylight.
So it's his left leg that's caught?
Maybe it's stuck right this. That.
Right.
You understand?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. right side, he can move right side.
Right.
But left side are under the stone.
Under the stone.
I was the retrieval coordinator on that day, and I was also the responding clinician. I got a handover from my colleague that said that an individual was immersed up to their neck, and it was felt at the time that it was going to be really unlikely that they were going to survive.
Every 2 hours, new helicopter was coming with different specialists and different equipment.
Being winched into a scene like that can be quite intense. You know people are working hard to get you onto what is essentially like a 2x2 metre pad. When the helicopter flies away, suddenly you feel sort of quite vulnerable, but you switch into ambo mode and start sort of assessing the scene.
At this stage, consider comms in the ravine entirely unreliable, and we will likely only have comms when you overfly at 22:30.
We kind of gathered together and had a brief about what was happening.
65-year-old male, fit, well, no medical history, no daily medications.
I could see Valdas in the water. He looked, at that point, quite vigorous.
It seems to be, for the most part, in relatively good spirits. We're doing our best to keep him warm.
Valdas has probably been in the water 5 or more hours at that point. I think he understood his predicament, but he was very calm about that, unusually calm. And I think he was probably also in pain, and he was very calm about that as well. He was the perfect patient in many ways.
What me and Nate want to do is to try and get down to him. We might do a combination of hauling and lifting.
We try and manually manipulate the leg. Nate pushing, me pulling. Then we tried to put a sling around his leg as far down as we could.
Nice. Yeah. That's around the top of his leg. It's not down the bottom. Right.
The pressure of the water was evident once it sort of got in there. You could feel that like an undertow trying to pull your legs down there.
And I'm trying. Yeah.
We pulled him down, we pulled him backwards, forwards at varying different levels of force.
So I've got spreaders, I've got a hydraulic jack, and I've got airbags.
We started using the hydraulic equipment. There was a gap where I could get the tips of the spreaders in. The theory was to try and get a little bit of movement in the rock, enough so Nate could actually pull Valdas's leg out. However, that didn't work. There was some talk around, could we jackhammer some of the rock, but that wasn't super practical. Could have actually made things worse.
There was an understanding across our group that if anyone had an idea, as far-fetched as it might be in any combination of our equipment, we would try every single one of those.
It was looking less and less likely that we would be able to move him. His knee was so stuck.
It seems like his leg has just gone perfectly into a shape made for his leg. And even if you got him into exactly the right position, which might be, upside down and tied in a knot, his leg was still jammed in such a way that you would have to break it more to pull it out. There was a real difficulty with interacting with the Lithuanians because English was very much their second or maybe third or fourth language.
In the next half an hour, some warm food. Are you happy to do that? Cool. Do you need help to go with you?
We are communicating with Valdas in our language and explaining him everything. And the one of paramedics said, please bring each half an hour of hot teas and hot food. I am a doctor, and I understand the risk of hypothermia. So we did, and this continued all the night.
The water temperature at the time was probably around 8 to 10 degrees. The outside temperature was actually one of the mildest nights for summer, so we had that in our favour.
It actually took quite a while for Valdas to become sort of dangerously hypothermic. Even into the early hours of the morning, Valdas was actually doing remarkably well. His heart rate remained very constant. His cognition and the way he was talking and responding and moving were all exactly what you would want.
Valdas is quite strong person. He will never say that he feels bad, feels some pain. He closed person.
Valdas was 65 years old when the incident happened. He was working as a database administrator. He was really fit because he was going on these rafting adventures with friends all the time. He didn't have any kids and he wasn't married, but he was really close to his sister Raza.
Valdas, jisai yra matematikas, jisai yra logikas. Jis turi apgalvoti visus ten IT momentus raftinge. Jis daug nekalba niekada. Jisai nesipasakoja labai daug. Labai užsispyręs buvo, labai užsispyręs. Bet šiaip tai labai geras.
I think Lithuanians are very courageous and strong people. We were always fighting because we would like to have our freedom. That courage and resilience, Valdas has that, definitely.
I've just never seen someone so resilient and so strong and so open to all of the methods around him to free him all night. And I still think it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Valdas had been in the water for around 16 hours and the elements are starting to really get the better of him. So hypothermia was a big risk.
It was about 6:30 where we essentially said, well, we've got one more shot at pulling him out. And that was quite a drastic attempt to essentially break his leg as we pulled him out.
That was another failed attempt. Then we had another brief with the doctors and paramedics who were saying, look, I think we've exhausted all our options.
It was at that point we had to make the decision to amputate.
I think we all sort of came to the realisation that this is the last resort, but the only resort at this point in time.
It was a big mental hurdle, realising that we were now going to cut his leg off. I felt so conflicted. I'd never, ever had to hurt someone to save their life.
It wasn't an easy decision. Actually, I just want to speak to one of my retrieval doctor colleagues, just so I could share the decision. But with the communication problems we had down in the ravine, that wasn't going to be possible. So certainly for me, I felt isolated.
Paramedic came to me and said, probably we don't have another chance to save Valdas, and we will need to amputate his leg. So I went to Valdas, asked how does he feel, and he said, I try to survive. I said, Valdas, now Rescuers will try to take you with the very power, and your leg can be broken. I didn't say him that they are preparing to amputate. Valdas just asked, so I will become a handicapper? Maybe, Valdas. But if not, you will die here in this hole. And maybe in few hours. And we shook hands, and Valdas made this movie like agreement.
I felt that Valdas had an understanding of what was about to happen or what needed to happen. And, you know, he clearly communicated his choice.
From memory, he just sort of said, yes, okay. Nodded his head, and that was it.
So we talked about doses of drugs. We talked about where we were going to be positioned. Then we talked about how we were going to remove the leg, basically, and free Valdas.
Dr. Nick, Mitch and Rowan were prepping their drugs, prepping all their gear, getting ready. And then while all that was happening, unfortunately, we had what we call an incident within an incident.
Walking down to the edge of the rock, I just lost my footing and I slipped and put my hand back, and all my weight went through my hand. And as soon as I've fallen, I immediately knew that I'd broken something. And I kind of picked my arm up to have a look at it, and I could see there was this big bend in it. And I was like, that's just terrible timing, Nick. A few expletives as well.
One of the paramedics said, oh, Ace, we've got a bit of a problem. He said, oh, Doc Nick's, Doc's just fallen over and broken his wrist.
There was only one doctor, and that was Nick, and so we needed him in good condition.
So straight away then we sort of knew that the amputation was going to go ahead as soon as we planned. I think Doc Nick was pretty shattered. When you're in those scenarios, you like to see them through. However, you know, that wasn't going to be the case, unfortunately, for Nick.
The night had been complex enough. We are all 20 or so hours into this mission. So the best thing we could do was request new, fresh personnel.
The word back from Ambulance Tas was they were sourcing another doctor and paramedic to come out on site. There's no doubt that Valdas's condition was worsening. So we were having those thoughts of, you know, is he going to hold on long enough for us to undertake the amputation?
I wanted to see Valdas alive, but time was running, and also his power and strength were dramatically decreasing.
The group is really up against the clock. So that was the big question. Could he hold on until another doctor arrived?
I prayed to God. That's all I could do.
I was actually at the end of a run of shifts when I got a call from my immediate boss at about 7:15 in the morning. He explained that Valdas had been entrapped now for around about 18 or 19 hours. And really, at this stage, the only feasible way to get Valdas as was going to require an amputation, and this was probably going to have to happen in a rapid underwater. I must admit, I was pretty horrified.
All avenues of rescue have now been exhausted and definitively said the patient will require amputation.
When we winched in, it's really almost a bit of an overwhelming scene. There was so many faces there of people who've been really working hard all night. And the scene itself was incredible. The river is very dramatic. Huge boulders, rushing rapid. It was really quite a hazardous situation.
We got a 10-minute handover of what the situation was. It was very much impressed on us that he wasn't going to survive if we delayed anything. So we just knew we're here to do the job that we've been tasked to do, which was to amputate Valdas's leg.
I certainly felt a professional obligation to make sure that there really was no other option. So we did talk through what had been done overnight, what had been tried, and everybody agreed that there was nothing else that could be done to get him out. And the inevitable consequence of him staying there was death. And that was going to be quite soon.
I cannot say that I was happy, but finally some stress decreased because final decision was taken.
We came up against a pretty critical issue, which was that our tourniquets wouldn't work on his leg.
The leg needed to have a solid tourniquet on so they wouldn't bleed once the leg was amputated. But it was really hard to get a tourniquet onto his leg.
It's all Velcro, and because of the flowing water, the Velcro just folded up on itself. Joe asked for some little ratchet straps just for strapping your gear down. So he was able to establish 2 tourniquets on Valdas.
We needed to be able to anaesthetise Valdas, which is a lot more challenging when someone's upright in a river. I really couldn't easily get to Valdas's head, which is crucial for managing the airway. So it was quickly obvious that we couldn't use general anaesthesia.
We gave Valdas a drug called ketamine. You're unconscious, but still breathing, you still have a heart rate. The really important bodily functions that keep you alive are still operating.
We're getting close to where we're actually going to do the amputation. So Rowan, paramedics, got Valdas's hand, and you've got Joe, the doctor, who's behind Valdas, and that's where he'll perform the amputation.
The only position I could get into was kind of in a slightly spread eagled, awkward position. And I really had to block out on the noise of the water and the environment around me. It's normally a visual procedure. You can see what you're doing. In this case, I couldn't see it. So I chose to not wear gloves so that I could actually feel what was going on.
No one ever trains how to amputate a leg above the knee, underwater, in the wilderness, with no resources, in a rapid on belay. It's such an extraordinary circumstance.
There was a moment before I started of a real sense of, I don't want to do this. I really, really don't want to do this. Not so much that it doesn't need to be done, it's more that it felt wrong. So I really had to talk myself through it, to think that it really does need to be done to save this man's life.
The amputation is currently being commenced.
First of all, I cut away the muscles of the thigh, leaving the tremendously strong femur. And we trained to saw through this using what's called a giggly saw, which is it's a fine wire, which has got sharp serrations on it. It's very light, which is why we favour it. But it's also pretty delicate.
Joe looked up and my first thought was, oh good, he's through, the patient's released. But then he's looked up at me and the look was of, oh no, and he held up the one end of the saw.
He met my eyes, I met his eyes. I showed him the broken giggly saw. It was just such a heart-sink moment. I can't believe that we've come so far and we can fail to get through the leg. Fortunately, we were able to break the femur. And then suddenly, Valdas was free. Suddenly, he sort of came backwards into my arms. I was waiting for a gush of blood, but there wasn't. And the entire procedure, although it felt a long time to me, only took about 2 minutes or so.
The tourniquet held perfectly, but he was in pretty rough condition at that point.
We've got the harness and a pulley system attached to Valdas. We're going to haul him approximately 2 metres up that rock face.
We were not allowed to look at this side, but I saw when Valdas was taken out with a special equipment, color of skin and all the body looked was died. When I returned to the camp, my friends asked how. Several minutes I was silent. I didn't say anything else than let's pray for Valdas.
With hypothermia, all your body systems slow down and almost stop. So, given the length of time that he is in the water, we anticipated that he was going to have a cardiac arrest minutes after we got him up.
Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, it became clear that Valdas was deteriorating. His heart rate was slowing, his breathing was not satisfactory.
He stopped breathing after about half an hour. So we connected him up to a ventilator. And then just as the helicopter's ready to come over scene and take him away, his heart stopped beating. So we performed CPR on him and we put on this mechanical CPR device and bundled him up and got him ready to be flown out of there.
This is where Valdas and Joe are about to get winched up to the aircraft. Everyone's hovering over the gear to make sure it doesn't get blown into the water.
When you've been in ambo for 17 years, you basically never see a patient like that and think, oh, we'll see him again. You think he's dead. And there's a little part of you that thinks that we killed him as his rescuers.
I didn't have a big hope that he will survive, maybe 1-2%. Nobody looked me at the eyes. Only one rescuer hugged me, but didn't say any word. I'm very thankful for him. That's lovely support.
Aš jį mintyse palaidojau, ta prasme, tai jo, pradėjau verkti. Ir taip, ta prasme, kažkaip, ta prasme, mintyse pradėjau atsisveikinti.
There's an immense relief when you get onto the helicopter and swing in through the door.
He had a surgical amputation of his left leg about 30 minutes ago. He's now in traumatic cardiac arrest.
We knew that all we can do is kind of maintain his breathing and circulation with the mechanical CPR device and get him into hospital.
We'll be at the Royal in about 20 minutes. Can we please have a pad activation and a trauma call for the ED?
There was a crucial radio call that summarised that he had a hypothermic cardiac arrest, what our ETA to the hospital would be, and that we required a heart-lung bypass machine on arrival, which is a really big call. It's a whole team that need to be there to receive the patient.
At that point, Valdas is gone, and we got this message to say, you've got to get all the people out of there too. 14 people, half a ton of gear, pulling apart all the rescue equipment. Eventually, I get winched into the helicopter, shoved into a seat. All of a sudden, you just sort of go, you just melt in your chair. You just sit there and stare out the window. You sort of think you're going to fly back to Hobart and sort of hear the news that Valdas didn't make it.
At the time of Valdas's arrival, he'd been in cardiac arrest for about an hour and a half with CPR ongoing. During that situation, every minute counts and there's ongoing damage occurring to all the organs in the body, and the one we worry about the most is the brain. From the time of Valdas arriving at the hospital to the time when he was on ECMO support was about 15 minutes or so.
We call ECMO the heart-lung machine. It keeps the heart and lungs performing when the body's not able to perform that function. In situations like this, you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and you can just hope for the best. And really, Valdas had everything thrown at him.
We were flying back to Hobart, and then my phone buzzed. It said, Valdas onto ECMO, heart rate 90, temperature 26.5. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, he's alive.
We knew that he wasn't out of the woods yet. There was a long way to go, and it was like, okay, is that the body just holding on to a little bit of hope?
If your heart stops beating on the side of the Franklin River, you're toast. Except that Valdas died of a hypothermic cardiac arrest. And it's one of the really unique ways where you actually have a chance.
With hypothermia, all your body systems slow down and almost stop. It's a unique situation where human beings can actually survive quite long periods of not breathing or very little heart activity.
In that situation, we can use ECMO to restore blood flow to the body and then also warm the body up in a controlled and safe fashion to the point where we can then restart the heart. But there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we thought it was more likely that he would not survive.
Valdas is in a critical condition in hospital, and the Lithuanian embassy calls his next of kin, his sister Raza, to let her know that there's been an incident on the river.
Jie patys nėra informuoti, bet pasakė, kad brolio atsitiko nelaimė ir kad būklė itin sunki. Vienu žodžiu, tai buvo kažkoks tai zombio egzistavimas, grinai.
Sometimes we know early on if there has been damage to the brain, but often in this situation it can take several days to really be confident either way about it. There was a plan made to perform a scan of the brain, and it just happened that on the day when that scan was due to be done, Valdas woke up.
kankinkit toliau, susitaikiau su, kad mirsiu. Ir kai jau šitą susitaikiau, jau girdėjau tą giesmę. Šitą, čia kaip paskutinė giesmė prieš dangų pakliūnant ar į pragarą. Ir po tos giesmės atsimerkiau ir žiūriu, kad balta, viršui balta lubos. Ir tai čia buvo ta reanimacijos palatoj, atsibudau.
The first message that Valdas just opened eyes happened after 4 days. I cannot express my feeling or feeling of my friends. They loudly shout in Lithuanian, "Valio!"
There were signs he was improving, but the concern was his neurological state. He was doing things like opening his eyes, but his eyes were rolling back and he was kind of thrashing around the bed. And it was an indication that, okay, maybe this gentleman's scared.
Visą laiką kankino košmaras, kad mane kažkas reketuoja, reikalauja išpirkos. Sako, jeigu nesumokėsi tos išpirkos, tave toliau kankinsim, visą jūsų grupę ir tempsim ten per tos akmenis.
The nurse from ICU contacted Lithuanian community asking, do you have anyone speaking Lithuanian and maybe they can come to the hospital? And in 20 minutes we were there. I just wanted to say, hello Valdas, I'm Jurgita, I live here in Hobart, just you are in safe hands, just I came to support you. And I think that when he heard someone saying in Lithuanian, ar gali paspausti ranką? Can you squeeze my hand? He started to respond, and I think probably that was because he felt, oh, someone spoke with him, like in the language which he understood. And the doctor said that, oh, he looks so much relaxed now. First day he couldn't speak, but the next day he started to respond, and his first words were what he said, I'm survivor. And that was said in English.
Tas jausmas, kad tu vis dėlto gyvas likai, vis dėlto ištrūkai iš to košmaro, atsigavau.
I was all in tears, nurses were in tears, we all like, it's such a beautiful moment, and he is a survivor.
Kai man telefoną parodė jį pirmą kartą, tai buvo, kažkas tokio. Ir kai jisai mane pažino, tai tada buvo džiugu. Yeah.
Hearing that he'd survived and that he'd survived with a working brain was just like, your heart was just ready to burst. There were more than a few moments with more than a few people, like just sort of cheering, like, yeah, you know.
I was in the slightly unusual position that my other role is within the hospital system as a trauma specialist. So I found myself being in the position of Valdas' treating doctor in the hospital. I certainly had to have a discussion with him early in the piece and explain that I was actually the person who cut off his leg. I felt like I had to apologise. And he too was quite emotional. But it formed a bond, I guess. Quite a unique bond, really. And I remember him looking up at me and saying, "I'm sorry." But yes, I felt there was a real moment of connection there where we both sort of looked at his leg and looked at each other and said, "I'm sorry, this is the way it is."
Beliko tik tais būdas, kad reikia atlikti tą amputavimą. Ir aš supratau, kad tai gerai, nes jeigu būtų nenusprendę to, aš įtariu, kad ir dar dabar likčiau tenais įstrigęs. Su 2 kojom, bet būčiau visas įstrigęs ir likęs ten tai. Svarbiausias tas dalykas, kad aš išlikau, išgyvenau ir tai didžiausias džiaugsmas.
After 18 days, he was discharged from ICU to the trauma ward to get him to the appropriate state to be able to get back home.
It was January when Valdas left the hospital. It was a joyful moment, and at the same time it was a sad moment. I saw tears in his eyes, and his sister said, "Never, Valdas never cries."
Kai Valdas išlipo iš lėktuvo, jeigu taip galima pasakyti, iš karto nuvežėm į ligoninę. Ir laimė, aišku, be galo. Aišku, pasikeitęs labai, numetęs svorio, matė, taip graudu buvo iš tikrųjų.
From the very beginning, Valdas wasn't able to think about the incident. But when he became stronger, he started to remember and he started to ask those questions, what happened.
Man tai atrodo, kad mano labai buvo hidrobatų kietas padas. Ir dėl to ant akmens jisai slysta iš tikrųjų. Čia reiškia, buvo nevykęs, man atrodo, pirkinys iš parduotuvės. Ir iš karto koja kažkaip ir pakliuvo į tą tarpą. Taip, kad ne iš vietos negalima buvo jos pajudinti. Aišku, pradėjau galvoti, o kas bus, jeigu manęs nesugebės ištraukti. Ir tada jau pradėjo galva, nes jau tą paskutiniai momentai iki amputacijos, jau aš jau nebeatsimenu. Aš to momento tiksliai neatsimenu, bet aš liktai atsimenu, kad gerai, linktelėjau galvą, reiškia, darykit, ką reikia. Taip suprast reikėjo. Tas momentas, kur aš jau nebeatsimenu nieko.
As a fellow kayaker, I can really feel for him with such a life-changing injury. Particularly since, I know that his passion is kind of expedition, exploration of rivers, which is going to be really terrifically difficult for him to continue to do that at the same level with an amputation. But on the other hand, Valdas is a tremendously strong, independent, accomplished person. I feel confident he'll adapt.
I'm trying to follow up on his recovery. Every time when I call him, I see such a progress. Like from just at the very beginning sitting just in wheelchair, then I seeing he's on crutches. And now I call him and he's walking on his prosthesis. He said, look, Jurgita, I can talk with you and hold my phone, and I can just walk.
Ai, kažkaip per daug nesureikšminau, kojos nėra. Bet džiaugtis, kad gyvas likai.
Valdai!
Kur sės čia?
Sveikas, Valdai.
Kadangi mano tas įvykis nutraukė žygį, tai aš turiu tokią pasiūtusią idėją, kad 26 metais vis dėlto sugrįžti į Tasmaniją ir pabaigti tą upę.
Susidaužiam. Kaip malonu tave gyvą matyti. It is the sign that Valdas fully recovered. He returned back for his strength, resistance, don't have any fear, and the plans must be done.
Jau buvo šie metai suplanuoti, o kitais metais nieko neplanuokit. Franklinas.
This idea that Valdas might want to come back and do the Franklin doesn't surprise me one little bit.
Akys šviesos, mėlynos.
Jau šitą praėjau, tai jau ten viską dabar praeisiu, ne?
You know, he's just got that determination that I think he could do that. Wow, I'd love to do that trip with him. Yeah, wouldn't that be fabulous?
This case was just such an incredible episode of teamwork. From the moment we got in there, people would sort of step in or out of the roles as they needed, and it continued on right through into the hospital, through emergency department, through the ICU, and it's what made the case work.
This story is a story of serendipity, really, of sort of 100 things that went his way.
But we were so lucky, a few millimetres of rain could have put an extra foot of water through the river, and I think we all know the outcome of that.
My friend survived for 23 hours in the cold water. He was a legend with 2 legs. But I think with 1 leg, or missing 1 leg, he will be double legend.
Svarbu, kad tu esi gyvas ir gyvenimas gražus. Aš skolingas Australijai. Australijos žmonės faktiškai man irgi padėjo išgyventi. Ir man iš karto ašaros akyse pasirodo, kai aš prisimenu jų tą rūpestį. Jeigu aš būčiau ne Australijoje, tai nežinau, kas būtų man likę. Tai aš Australijai labai skolingas. Thank you for Australia.